That was back in 1997, and that was myself, Pete, and my brother Mike. We started a band. Mike was on drums, and I sang and played guitar. We also had a load of bass players, but we had an earlier bass player back then, and we just basically played in the garage, just jammed. We were teenagers at the time, just like it was actually in my mother's house. We had like a garage set up, and we just turned everything up full blast and just jammed for ages. Even got a few solicitors' letters sometimes from the neighbours, but that's another story. And music really, is cliche as it is. Just I grew up. I always listened to music. I guess I was the youngest out of three siblings. My older brother, both my brothers were big into music. Even my older brother, he was into, back in the day, he was into Guns N' Roses, Iron Maiden, all that kind of stuff. So even when I was 9 years old, he had cassette copies of Appetite for Destruction and Replay, and I knew all the lyrics, even the curse words and everything, going to primary school. But for me anyway, personally, my kind of epiphany point was in 1992 when I was about 10 years old. Teen Spirit was on, I think it was the Den at the time, Zig and Zag. They used to have like a music video on after every show, and Teen Spirit came on, and that, for me, I found my genre of music when I heard that at 10 years old. Like, so.
You actually had Teen Spirit on RTE on the.
Oh yeah, I used to. Yeah, that was the debut. It was played back then. I knew it was on the radio too and stuff. It was actually on daytime radio, which was kind of cool. Like, so. Back then, I just bought that was my first cassette I bought, was Nevermind. And after that, I just discovered bands like Alice in Chains and all the Seattle scene that was happening back then. And we didn't have internet either back then, so everything was basically the tapes you had, you just played them into the ground and repeat for like 4 or 5 times a day. Use your imagination.
Can I ask about see when you first started the whole garage band thing?
Yeah.
Back in the mid sort of late 90s, what was the music scene like in Ireland, or in Cork, or where you started gigging?
When we started the band?
Yeah.
There was actually, from about 1999 to about, I'd say, the start of 2001, there was actually a really cool scene in Cork City. It kind of kicked off in Nancy Spain's on Bark Street, and then it moved from there to the Phoenix, which is next to the lobby, the former lobby, which was over the quay by the City Hall. I don't know if you know where that is, but there was this crazy scene where basically all these, like, there was no security on the door of the pub, so all these kids would show up at night time and just jam the place out, and there was no sound man, no sound engineer, nothing. So it was just like a big jam, but the place was just jammed with kids and people. And even back then, it still wasn't the whole social media, internet thing wasn't, like, people barely had a mobile phone. Even in 1999, it was, it wasn't in full swing. So it was basically still very DIY, kind of, the flyers were handwritten flyers that were photocopied with pictures of random stuff from like magazines, or, it looked like a patchwork flyer. And people just walked around the city and just handed them out. And for about a year, like that was our kind of foundation. That was when we started playing gigs, was in about 99. And that was when there was just a scene happening with loads of bands. There was like punk bands and everything. We even got like one or two kind of, the guys organising it, got a couple of like semi-big bands. I think one of them actually got the Dropkick Murphys to come over and play Spalpeen Phonach. And it went on for like a year, and then venues started closing down, and I can't remember what happened, but bands dismembered, or, they split up, and the scene kind of faded away. But
kind of faded away before you realised.
Yeah. But that was like our foundation for gigging in Cork before even we had an album out or anything. It was just playing the Phoenix, which was like it was fun, a lot of fun. Loads of stage diving, and it was cool. Yeah. I'm trying to, if I remember correctly, about 99, that was the same year, we had a couple of demos done for songs that eventually ended up on the first album, Circular Growth. In 2000, Mike, the drummer, and my brother, he moved to the States, he moved to Boston. I followed him over a couple of months later, and the idea was, we just felt like we were both working over there too on building sites and all that kind of stuff. But we also brought over our guitars, and the idea was to either shop our music to labels or play music over there basically. So we had a demo that we done in Sunbeam in Cork, and we just started shopping that to US labels mostly. And we got a reply back from a label in LA. They sent us a semi-okay deal for us at the time anyway. I was 18 years old, and it was a one album deal, and it sounded sweet. It was just jump on a plane for 2 weeks. They have a studio, and they put us up in a hotel and all that stuff. So we signed a contract, jumped on a plane, flew over. That was the end of 2000, and that was when we recorded Circle of Growth. We got it pretty much nailed in 2 weeks.
Who was the lineup for that? Was yourself?
That was actually just the two. For basically all the albums, we were always without a bass player. So it was Mike and myself basically. And I ended up playing the bass, and Mike done drums, harmonies, and I done guitars, bass, vocals. So it was a good experience. It was, you know.
Looking back on that album, how do you feel about it now? Like those songs, did they stand up still, or is it just a moment in time that was captured on?
Moment in time, and some of them I'm nearly embarrassed listening back to them, because there was just songs I wrote when I was 15 and 16 and I just have zero connection to them anymore. But it was, at the time, I mean, there were the songs we had, and it was 3-chord punk, grunge, you know, early Nirvana, Mudhoney kind of style stuff, because that's what we were listening to. And
you wore your influence on your sleeve back.
Yeah, it was very, you can totally hear it, like, I mean, you know. But we just,
You remind me now of, I forget his name, but the Silverchair frontman. He absolutely hates his early material. It's the same kind of thing. Their first two albums, he was like 16, I think.
Yeah. That's understandable though. Yeah. Like, I can kind of totally understand that. I mean.
Well, unfortunately for him, that's his most popular stuff.
Yeah. He really tried, I think, to bring the band Silverchair. Like, I was a fan for Silverchair. I wasn't a huge fan of the early stuff, but the middle album, Neon Ballroom, for me, when I heard that album, that was when Silverchair were actually Silverchair and no other band, you know. Like that, I think that's an album he could kind of be proud of. Like, but after that, he kind of wandered in a totally different direction. Then
I got a wee bit out to you after that.
Yeah.
So but the album didn't come out until 2002.
Yeah.
Was that an issue with the label, or was it just that's when?
It was the label. Yeah. It was basically we flew back to Ireland, and then there was the mastering and artwork and all this stuff, and you're trying to do it over long distance. And we actually voluntarily flew out to the States in between that time again to play some gigs that we had organised over there, and with the intention as well of kind of to speed up the process of getting the album released. But there was just loads of delays, and the label were kind of, the communication was bad, and it came out in 2002, but to this day we have no records of what's been sold, what they done with the album. So we decided after that it fizzled out basically. The contact ended, and we just ended up kind of saying, ended on semi-good terms, but just kind of said, look, let's just call it a day. We've done one album. We don't think it's happening, like, and they don't seem to be doing too much with the album either, you know.
When did you come back to the States? When did you come back to Ireland?
Well, when we recorded the album, that was December 2000, and that was 2 weeks. And then we just flew back after the 2 weeks basically. And then in, I think it was 2002, we actually flew back over to the States then again, but that was off our own back then. That was like, we'd organised a few shows over there, and there was kind of a festival we done in Las Vegas, and we flew over and played that. And Las Vegas isn't too far from LA, so we jumped on a charter flight to LA too, to try and sort things out, but it didn't happen really. It was always a 3-piece, yeah. But it seemed every time we hit the studio, we never had a bass player, basically. So it's just about, we've gone through about 8 bass players, I'd say. 9 actually, if I think of it. And it's totally, yeah. Like our longest one, he moved to Bjorn, his name was. We met him back in the scene in 1999, like he played in another band in the Phoenix days. And he played with us for about a year and a half, from 2001 to about 2002, and then he actually ended up moving to Amsterdam, so we were without a bass player again, and then we got another bass player. It was just a revolving door of bass players. Influences basically, and I think that was a sound we felt we found our own sound with this album a lot more than the other album. There was only maybe 2 years, 3 years of a difference in the recording, but it was still, for us, it was a lot more what we wanted to do. We recorded that in BPM Studios in Cork, and it was just a lot more our sound, really, like what we were looking to do. A lot more melodic maybe, but we still had some heavy stuff in there, and reflected the time too, like every album, a time in our lives. And it was just Mike and myself again in the studio, just kind of recording, mixing everything, and yeah, it was good. Oh, all the time, yeah. Even though we both love bands like Alice in Chains and stuff, he's a huge Guns N' Roses fan. He loves a lot of 80s metal too and stuff like that. I'm totally not a Guns N' Roses fan. I'd listen to kind of everything from Jeff Buckley and Elliott Smith and stuff like that too, and even some of the kind of bands like Jesus Lizard and stuff like that. I'd be a big fan of noise rock as well, and that wouldn't be hugely his thing either. So even in the studio, sometimes I'd be looking for more of a rough and ready sound, and he'd be more kind of, keep it heavy and rocking, but clean as well at the same time, you know. So, I mean, I'm a big fan of guitar feedback and, you know, running pedals, like 20 pedals into each other, like, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm experimentation in the studios. You know, on lo-fi recordings, I love all that stuff as well. It's just, I mean, we get on pretty well, but we do have a different taste in music to a certain degree, like, you know. What we done, we've been playing quite a bit actually in the run up to that album. Even after the first time we organised loads of gigs around Cork ourselves, and we even played up the country. We played gigs in Galway and Dublin, and then headed over to the States too. But around 2004, not long after recording Sacred, I think we played about 2 or 3 shows, and then Mike ended up going to Canada for a year, and I actually ended up going to London. And there was a kind of a slight hiatus playing live with the band. We still done our best to promote the album and all that, but there was a bit of a lack of touring for the album compared to the amount of shows we usually played. I'm trying to fast forward to where I am then. After I came back from London, then I pretty much directly moved to Berlin for another 5 years.
And this is when you went solo, right?
Yeah. Time as well. I always said, every time I came back from Ireland, I always had itchy feet. Like I jumped off the plane and I was like, you know, about a week, I was like, okay, I want to, you know, head somewhere else again. And I done that a lot when I was young. Like we went back and forth to the States a bit, a couple of times. So when I came back from London, I was living there about a year, and then it was pretty much itchy feet again. I just wanted to head off. Mike, in the meantime, Mike had came back from Canada because he was only there for a year as well. So when I moved to Berlin, he was actually in Ireland. He lived in Ireland for about another 2 years before moving back to Canada again. So in that time, before the whole solo thing happened, you know, the solo album and all that stuff, we actually organised shows in Germany, and he flew over, and we played a couple of outdoor festivals, like free festivals, and we also booked a few shows in Berlin, and we just basically thought we hadn't toured the album properly, Sacred, so we really said we'd try and basically just like 2 years after the album's release, we said we'd try and play some shows in another country as well. And we'd another bass player too at this time, a new bass player.
I'm not going to ask the bass player to take over to keep track.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a few scenarios. Like when we played in the States, it was kind of like a semi-festival, semi-battle of the bands thing, where there was judges and stuff. That was in Vegas, and at that it was an all-ages gig. I'm trying to think, like when we played that, I just remember there was like a few kids in the audience, like with like Slayer t-shirts or whatever, just metal kids basically. But they were totally into it, they were jumping around, and when they heard we were Irish, that was like a bigger plus. And we actually ended up selling, I noticed we sold to loads of copies of our albums and CDs at gigs in the States. Even if there was only like, you know, 20 or 30 people there, they we could have easily sold 10 albums, you know, so like half the audience would have came up and like went, oh, can I buy an album, you know, and that was one difference with the American audience.
How would you describe the German audience?
The Germans were like a couple of different scenarios again, but when we played Berlin, we played like it was a nightclub actually, and they had a section where a live band played, and then after they'd have the club, and there was loads of people there, but sometimes they'd be just standing there like that, and you wouldn't really, it would be hard to tell if they're into it or not, but they'd all still give you good applause at the end of it and stuff like that. And then maybe halfway, they take a while to warm up, and then halfway through the show you'd see like a few heads in the front kind of bopping around and stuff like so. Like that show in Berlin, it was the Sage Club. I don't know if you've ever been to Berlin. There's a venue called the Sage Club, and every once a week there's something called Rock at Sage, and it's basically one of the bigger clubs in Berlin for rock music. It's like an alternative night basically, and that night was pretty nuts. I remember like it was definitely one of the most packed shows we've ever played. Like they usually have like the band and then the club, and there's always only one band. And after we played, it was like 2 a.m. in the morning, and there was still people queuing outside the venue to get in. Like it was just crazy busy. Like, and that was a kind of a nutty show, in a way, like because it was just so busy. And we'd our own backstage area, and it was just like I think there was about 400 or 500 people there or something. And we've never played in front of that many people in one go before, like in another country too, you know. So yeah, I think that was about the second show our bass player played with us too. So he just flew over with Mike, and he was like well impressed when, you know, he was like, oh, if every show could be like this, you know, it'd be pretty good. As I was living in Berlin and Mike was in Ireland, I think he flew over. He flew over about 2 or 3 times in the space of about 3 years to play some shows. But ultimately, he had loads of material written, and I just wanted to get him recorded, get him down, even acoustically. So I was looking around at studios and stuff, and I kind of thought maybe I'd go the lo-fi way. So I ended up buying some just home recording equipment, like a 4-track and some good microphones. And I just set up our apartment over there. I just set up the bedroom basically like a home studio. And I just hit the record button and started recording basically. And it was really limited too, because there was only a 4-track I had. So I kind of liked that it was limited, that I had to really be a bit more creative, like, than just saying, oh, I have loads of different tracks, I can just use whatever. And I ended up like doing like certain songs, like I recorded in the bathroom for the reverb, and the neighbour downstairs was probably wondering what the hell was going on, but yeah, corporate pollution in the bathroom, that was a funny one. Yeah. Acoustically, yeah, but I just experimented and stuff.
You mentioned
just life, I suppose, and what I feel about a lot of stuff that affects everyone, and that stuff you'd see in the news or stuff that you just see in society in general. Yeah, corporate pollution is just about kind of nearly self-explanatory, really. It's just about the corporate world and how it kind of dominates pretty much everything from your life, from like the food you eat to just when you go to the clothes shop and you buy clothes, and you know, everything is basically controlled by a corporation, where they're just trying to squeeze basically the middleman out, and it's like everything's capitalized to a ridiculous extent, you know, where it's just the balance is completely off. And it was just, yeah, like that's basically why I wrote a song like Corporate Pollution, like, 'cause it was just my opinion to that whole world basically, and that extended ultimately to the album then as well, to the next Paradox album. I ended up using the whole theme of corporate pollution, and I called it Corporate Pollution as well, like so. In Germany I actually did, yeah. That was a totally different experience too, because that was something I hadn't done before, and for me, I don't think I fit the singer-songwriter niche very well. I done a few of I booked my own shows in Germany, and they ended up playing like, I done like a busker festival and things like that, and I booked a few venues in Berlin, like basements of venues and stuff, which was great. Some gigs were fantastic. One gig where I kind of played and I kind of thought it's not really for me to be a singer-songwriter, like I missed the band. It was what was it called? I can't remember the name of it, but it was like a big competition for folk singers in Berlin, and I got on the slot for one of the years, and it was kind of like a judging panel of like from the audience, and I don't think the audience liked what I was doing because I ended up like it was very folky, and then I walked on stage, and I think I actually used a distortion pedal in my acoustic, and I dropped everything to D, and it sounded a bit more raunchy, you know, and a bit more kind of not folky enough for the folk crowd, basically, singer-songwriter. Yeah. So after that, I was like, yeah, I don't know if the audience got it, and then I was thinking, you know what, I definitely need a band again, like so. I mean, I don't mind playing acoustic, but I just don't. There's so many singer-songwriters out there as well, and I just don't think I'm one of them people. I was listening a lot, yeah, Jar of Flies, and I was listening a lot at the time to Elliott Smith and Eddie Vedder's solo album as well, Into the Wild. I was listening to a lot of that stuff, and PJ Harvey and people like that, like, and that's where I was really thought, oh, I can just play solo, you know, but in that kind of genre, like, but it's just tough, yeah, you know. So. Yeah, that we basically, Mike was edging to play as well because he's always been half of the band. So anytime we've been like apart like that, and it's always like after a certain length of time we end up talking and we're like, okay, we got to just go back into the studio again and record. And that was basically it. We just had loads more songs written. I had a lot of songs written over the space of a few years before Corporate Pollution. So we just we booked the studio down in Kerry, and that was in 2010. And we headed down for 2 weeks straight, slept in the studio and everything. And we just recorded all the songs basically there. 11 tracks we just put down, and we just flew through everything. And as I said, yeah, I slept in the studio, got up in the morning, hit the record button again, next take, you know. So yeah, that was 2010 we done that, we recorded that.
You feel
that? At the time, yeah, definitely. But even the new album that we've recorded now is even, again, for me, it's more my style, like where I'd want to be. I mean, Corporate Pollution was great. At the time we kind of polished the sound, and we really made it like we said, oh, we'll try and make it as powerful as possible. But again, with me, kind of in the back of my mind, I was always thinking I like that lo-fi kind of rough edge that gives it a bit more punk rock attitude as opposed to kind of like a slick rock album, you know. Even though, I mean, there's points in Corporate Pollution I really like and I'm proud of, and songs and everything, but it's kind of, I always like having not mistakes in a recording, but little kind of accidental noises that just, you know, feedback from your guitar or something that's just left in the recording and kind of wasn't intentional but just ended up there. And with Corporate Pollution, we really, like, the engineer at the time really worked to make it a very clean rock album, you know, so. I mean, playing live is spontaneous, and even to capture that on an album too would be really cool, like, because, you know, you're just in the moment when you're playing live, and if you start doing too many takes in the studio, you lose the atmosphere nearly, you know. And I mean, it's happened a few times where we might be doing vocal takes over and over, and I might just lose my patience and just say, look guys, call it a day for today, and I'll come back and I'll do it tomorrow. And then the next day it's 10 times better because the attitude is right, or the atmosphere, you know. Whereas if you're really trying to force something just for the sake of getting it, you actually hear it in the recording, and, you know, for me as well, it's kind of like a one-shot thing with the song. You just want to do your best with it, like, so.
Is a live album something you'd like to do?
Yeah, it would be, yeah, definitely, yeah. I like live recordings, putting mics all over the place and just jamming, yeah, it's definitely something I'd like to do. At some stage, next album. Yeah. We got a good bit of airplay with it, some nice reviews, and we ended up making a music video then for it as well. And that got a few video nominations as well. One of them was the Berlin Music Video Awards. It got nominated. Portobello Festival in London, I think, was another one. And yeah, it went well, really. Well, Mr. Bureaucracy, the track, I wrote that song in Germany, just with all, because there's a lot of bureaucracy in Germany, so it just came out. A lot more than in Ireland, actually. And it's in German too, a different language, so it makes it even more complicated. But the video was basically, Yeah, I had a storyboard written and a few sketches of like just like an office environment where basically I was trying to think what bureaucracy means, and ultimately what comes to mind is just an office environment where you're just given a run around nearly, you're sent in circles, and I just wanted to bring that across in a video where people are nearly like zombies behind a computer just typing and completely mindless, and I think that kind of came across. Like I also had the idea of having everyone wearing masks just so everyone's kind of disguised, but everyone's wearing the same mask so they all look the same basically. Yeah, and as the video progresses it just gets more intense with the person behind the computer typing, and she just like has like a drip going from the computer screen into her arm, and just ideas like that. Like it was just brainstorming, but the guy's done a great job in the editing production as well, so that really made it stand out a lot more. A little bit more. We actually done a week, like a UK tour as well. We've never played the UK before, so we organised a kind of our own UK tour, basically where we just jumped in. Mike had a blue van, blue Hiace, good old Hiace, and we jumped in the ferry over to England and done the old UK thing, sleeping in the van and sleeping on people's couches. So a few people put us up, which was very nice. Half of the shows went really well and the other half were a complete disaster, and that's the way it is. But we came back in the ferry again and we continued touring. We ended up booking more shows around Ireland. I'm trying to think, did we do any more gigs in Germany? No, it was just the UK tour, and then Ireland basically. We just toured Ireland. We didn't get back to the States again for this album, or for Corporate Pollution, unfortunately. That was... In the meantime, Mike actually moved to Canada on a permanent basis, and he's still living there. So initially, I went down I have a friend of mine who also plays in another band called Screenreader, Brian Casey. He plays solo too, and he has his own recording studio in Bantry in West Cork. So he invited me down basically just to initially do some demos, just new demos. I just had a bunch of new songs written over the last few years that were being pieced together basically. So I went down, it was just me, and we just started demoing tracks, and I ended up playing drums and then jumping on the guitar and overdubbing the guitar, and then just basically just recording everything, but within just the intention really that it was just a demo. But they just started turning out really good. We were really happy with them, and we just started experimenting with sounds, like different ways of recording the guitar, and we ended up using a few samples and stuff, but like real samples, like that I actually recorded, because I was never really a fan of like artificial samples, So we just experimented with the sound, like, and we just I started going down there maybe once a month, just myself, and just kind of piecing together, doing another song, doing another few tracks, and it just started turning out really well. So I thought I had the idea to do a second solo album, because Mike was in Canada as well, and I was thinking, will he just use it as a solo album? But it kind of sounded, with the drums and the electric guitars and everything, it just had a kind of a paradoxy sound to it. Like,
I suppose how could it not?
Yeah. So I just thought like, yeah, it's gonna have to be Paradox, labeled Paradox, but I was like kind of playing everything. So in the meantime, last year, yeah, we kept going once a month basically. Roughly, I headed down there over the space of like a year and a half, just recording. My brother Mike, he came back to Ireland last year for a couple of weeks as well, just for a visit, and he ended up then coming down to the studio with me to lay down a few drums for a few of the heavier songs, because he's a much better drummer than I am, and he is the original band's drummer, like. So we ended up recording a few with him. It's kind of like a patchwork album. It's as I said, it was recorded over the space of a year and a half. We even recorded 2 extra tracks I was in Canada for just a visit as well this year, sorry. And Mike has his own recording set up in Canada as well, because he records his own music too. So we ended up recording another 2 songs there, 2 Paradox songs that we're going to put in a new album too. So it'll be kind of like 2 tracks recorded in Canada and the rest in Bantry. Yeah, it's a lot more experimentation, this album. We also had We also got a cello player, which is something I always wanted to do since God knows when, since I first heard cello with rock music. I was always had it in my head, oh, it just sounds really cool and kind of mournful and sad and stuff, but really it sounds really awesome mixed with guitars, like. So we got a cello player down to play on four tracks, and then we just experimented too. We just got the cello player to do a bunch of noise in the cello and like put distortion on it and just messed about with that, you know. Like I was doing the same with the guitar, so I was like, oh, you can do the same with the cello, you know, just run it through a distortion pedal, you know. So we ended up doing that. Yeah, it's just a lot more experimentation with this album. That's why, like, it's a bit more where I feel it is our best to date, because there's just a lot on there. There's a lot of lo-fi stuff, which I'm a fan of. Lots of, you know, random guitar stuff that I didn't even intend to have on it, but ended up on the album anyway, on the songs, you know. So. Yeah.
What about the single?
Yeah.
Nothing Lasts.
Yeah, that could be borderline a solo song, but when it kind of breaks into the heavier piece, it's definitely a kind of a Paradox song. That actually wasn't going to be the single initially. I wanted to put out another single called Eat, a song called Eat, which is a new track, and I wanted to do a proper video for the song as well, just because there's a kind of a story to go with it. But the song itself is over 5 minutes long, and I kind of thought, based on a few other people's opinions as well that kind of were listening to it, they were kind of saying maybe you should aim towards a kind of a shorter song, and a lot of people are suggesting Nothing Lasts is one of the stronger tracks on the album. So I was persuaded, and I said, okay, I'll put that out first. So that's the first single there. But now I'm going to definitely pull a few more songs off the album and future singles and stuff. I mean, because nobody's recording albums anymore apparently. It's just albums is what I grew up listening to, and for me they kind of, every time I had an album, like I bought cassettes and I bought CDs when I was a kid, and it was always a full album with the artwork, and you know, I mean, there's like, I think Soundgarden's album Down in the Upside has like, or both of them actually, they have like 16 songs in each album, you know, and like the Pumpkins brought out Melancholy and The Infinite Sadness, and I was like, how many songs were in that? Like 100, you know. Like, you know, I mean, it's just, this is what I grew up listening to, and this kind of, nowadays it's either a single that's on iTunes or at best an EP, you know. And it's just, for me personally, I just never liked it, and I can see why some people are like we played something called U Bloom. I don't know if you ever heard of that in Dublin. That was over a year ago, and it's basically a music, it's like South by Southwest in Ireland. And part of the kind of festival thing, you had a panel of industry people that you could speak to, and it was like a speed session. You'd go like there was like a producer, and there was like a road manager, and there was all these different people, and I went to all of them, and they were just I had my album with me, like Corporate Pollution, and I was giving them the album, and nearly all of them were saying like, oh, why are you recording albums, you know, except one guy actually. One guy, he was very happy that I gave him an album, but everyone else, they were like, these are like proper producers, like Warner Brother guys that you could speak to for 10 minutes, and he wasn't lecturing me, but he was like, oh, you know, albums aren't the way to go, you gotta, you know, the music industry is changing, it's all digital age, nobody's really buying albums anymore, it's all about one track, or, you know. And to me, I was just thinking, like, in my head, I don't see the point, and like, you know, I still came
to that one person.
Yeah, like it was one guy, he was the road manager. Again, I actually think he said he worked with Soundgarden as well. And when I gave him the album, he was really happy, and he was like, oh, I love albums, he says, finally. And he was like, I was just asking him about the tracks, I was telling him about Mr. Bureaucracy and all that stuff, and he was really happy about it, just to hear it, like. But everyone else was basically saying, oh, albums are totally not the way to go. But for me, we've always done it DIY, and you know, we pay for our own albums. We have for the last few years anyway, or for the last few albums. So for me, it has to be a full-length album. Well, the first single's out. Immediate future, the new album Chapters is going to be out. I'm pushing for mid to late January. We also have 2 release shows booked for the album release. That's in Crane Lane in Cork on January 24th, and the Barrows Clonakilty, West Cork, on January 30th. They're both going to be free shows, and there's going to be copies of the album as well for like €5 or something cheap, and lots of other goodies and freebies as well we'll probably give away. And for these shows as well, what's going to be cool is we're going to have a cello player live as well, and the guy who produced the album as well is actually going to be drumming. He's like a multitasking musician, engineer guy. He's going to be on drums for it as well, so it's going to be really cool. Current bass player is Yetta. She's been playing in the band. Actually, the first show she played with the band was the UK tour in 2010. And she basically has been playing in the band since then, and she sings in the new album as well. She does a few harmonies, which is nice, which is another new thing we never really had on the previous albums, was female vocals, which is totally awesome as well. I'm a big fan of Melissa off the Moor and all them people. So yeah, live she's playing bass. We had a drummer who plays shows with us every now and again called Sean. He has other projects as well on the side, so he plays in other bands. So we've no kind of exclusive drummer, but he plays a lot of gigs with us. And for the release shows, we have Brian Casey, who produced the album. He's going to be, and done the engineering. He's going to be playing drums in the release shows. And we also have another drummer who plays with us, Andrew O'Sullivan as well, who is the drummer of Brian's band, Screenreader. It's all very complicated, but
yeah.
And there's myself as well, yeah. You know.
You'll be all the thing. So.
And a cello player live. We're gonna, just for the release shows, Maeve Kelly, she's going to be playing cello live, hopefully, anyway. So if we can recreate the sound a bit live, it would be cool. Like, yeah. Just speaking of Irish bands, this was years ago. Like, even though loads of people can't stand U2 anymore. But I actually bought the album War. I have it on cassette, and the Sunday Bloody Sunday and all them songs. And like, whatever way you see Bono and all that, like, U2 are a classic band, just one of the classic bands as well. I wouldn't really be a big fan of their music now, but years ago, as Irish bands go, that's what I listened to. I bought U2's War album and I thought it was awesome. Curb Dog, I was always a big Curb Dog fan, and we actually had the privilege of opening for Curb Dog, when was that? A year and a half ago, in Cypress Avenue in Cork, which was great as well. And Therapy as well, another great Irish band. We had the privilege of playing with them too. We were lucky enough to play both of these bands.
Curb Dog are back.
Yeah.
What do you think of the return?
Awesome, yeah. It's still, I heard their new song and it basically sounds like their older material, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it's great that they're back playing, and I've always been a Curb Dog fan, you know. Yeah, and they're cool guys as well. I think they're a nice bunch of guys. Yeah, I mean, when I kind of think back, even in the 90s, when I discovered all my favourite artists, like, I can't remember the last time I really heard a band where I just thought, oh, this is something special, and that just left a big impression on me. Like, obviously, when I was a kid, Nirvana done it. When I discovered Elliott Smith and Jeff Buckley and all them people, you were just left with this huge impression that, you know, and you're like inspired to play music yourself. And that just hasn't really happened. There hasn't been a band like that, I personally think, in a long time, that I heard where I really was completely blown away. Like a new band, you know, or a new artist, you know. I mean, I can't really think of any. As I said, maybe Royal Blood are a pretty good band, new band, you know, they're kind of doing something different. You know, I can't really think of too many. I suppose it's the fact that you have to, well, things like Spotify too. I mean, I don't use Spotify myself, but it is, you know, for me it does take away people's kind of initial motivation to buy an album. They just kind of think, oh, you know, I have it on my iPad. Nobody's not, you know, why would I buy it on CD or have a physical copy of it, or even pay to download the whole thing? People just not, I don't know, everything's so, for me anyway, the digital age is everything, my idea is like everything's so accessible, and everything's so easy to get, you know, like people have an iPhone and they can have, you know, I don't know, 1,500 songs in it easily, or 1,000 songs, and they don't even know what's on their iPhone, you know, and they just think, oh, that's like the way music has gone nowadays, for me, I think, which is really bad and kind of sad, because oh, big time. Like when I was a kid, as I said, I had I don't know, maybe up until the age of 14 or 15, I had like 6 cassettes, and that was it. That was all the music I had, and it was Alice in Chains, Dirt, Nirvana, Nevermind, and I can't remember what other tapes I had back then, but basically it was extremely valuable what I had. And nowadays, it's like if you have like 1,000 songs on your iPhone, as I said, it's just not valuable. I don't know, I just can't really, doesn't do it for me. What can I say? I mean, he's the guy that, and his band, that got me into music in the first place. I kind of think, like, especially after Nirvana kind of went and Kurt killed himself and all that stuff, like there was a lot of kind of post-grunge bands, but a lot of other bands, for a while people were nearly embarrassed to say that they were influenced by Nirvana, or to even use the term grunge. They were maybe afraid of criticism and stuff, and for me it's like, as long as you're not blatantly ripping the guy off or Nirvana off to the point where it's a parody, you know, where you see the band and you think, oh, this is like a joke of Kurt Cobain. If you're generally influenced by grunge music or any music, then so be it. Like, it shouldn't be something that you should be like, oh, I don't want to use the term grunge. Like, I often use, it doesn't even mean anything. I mean, it's just a word that I think it was Mark Arm came up with from Mudhoney. I mean, you know, it's laughable. It was even laughable back then. It's just a word. But we've used it as a genre to promote our paradox, because at least people know, like, rock is such a wide spectrum, and even alternative as well. So at least when people knew grunge, they knew it was going to be, they kind of nearly knew what they were going to get. So we often use that as a genre, like when we were promoting the band, you know. So hugely underrated musician and artist, if you ask me, and I actually think his death was a little bit more tragic than Kurt's, even though Kurt Cobain's death had a bigger impact on me because I was a kid at the time and they were just my favourite band or whatever. But by the time it came to Lane's death, it kind of feels like everybody had forgotten about Alice in Chains. I remember even when I was in the States and we had the radio on, and they kind of play rock music on the radio all the time over there. Like in daytime radio, there's a lot of rock music, and there's also a lot of like commentary between the DJs. And they would be just, I remember once they played Alice in Chains, and then the DJ came on after, and he was like joking. This was before he died. He was like joking, saying, "Oh, I heard Lane has no teeth left, and I heard he's a hermit, and I heard he's this, and I heard he's that." And it was just this big joke on the radio about it, just after they played like Down in a Hole or something. And I remember just thinking, like, you know, firstly they've no right, and secondly, like, you know, they play his music and then they just mock the hell out of him. And it actually wasn't long after that I actually heard the news he was dead. And sadly enough, I actually heard he was dead 2 weeks after he was dead, like 2 weeks after the news broke. And I was just thinking, like, first thing I thought to myself was, why didn't I hear about it? Like, I didn't read anything about it anywhere that he died, Lane. And he only just jumped online, done a bit of research, and then actually found out, wow, he actually died like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, you know. And there was just no coverage about it, you know, maybe a tiny bit in the magazine, but there was no front cover, you know. Even I think the same year the Grammys happened in the States, and they had a section of musicians that died that year, and Lane Staley wasn't included, you know. And I remember, I think Jerry Cantrell in an interview, he was just saying, like, it was just a joke. I mean, he was just completely forgotten about, you know. So yeah, for me, Lane Staley, I mean, completely underrated artist, and tragic the way he just seemed to fade away, basically, you know.
Well, what do you think about the current incarnation of Alice in Chains?
I think it's good because it's the remaining members. It's still Sean Kinney on drums and still the original members of the band. The singer too. I mean, like everyone, I had my reservations at the start. I was thinking, how the hell is that going to work? Like, you couldn't do that with Nirvana. You know, I couldn't think of anyone. You know, how do you replace Lane Staley? And when I heard it, like, for me, I don't think he's trying to replace Lane or anything. It's more like nearly like a tribute to the guy, and they never had that intention in the first place. So as long as they're not trying to replace the guy, I think it's good. Yeah, I like it. Probably is. I mean, Pearl Jam are one of the last original remaining grunge bands still active that actually didn't split up and reunite or something, you know. I mean, you gotta give them credit for that, you know. And I've always been a Pearl Jam fan as well, you know. I mean, some albums are better than others, but I think Eddie Vedder, I think he's sincere in the music, and even for a while in the 90s they actually did rebel against the whole kind of commercial side of the whole thing. Like, they were just put in the middle of the mainstream, and they were just like a pop band nearly. And Eddie Vedder was like, you know, okay, we're just not going to do any more videos. And he really tried to push the limits, I think, to prove that they're a valid band, even though he didn't even need to, but he felt like he did back then, you know. And it's like, yeah, Billy Corgan, I don't know, if you ask me, I like the Pumpkins, but I just don't like Billy Corgan, and I'm sure I'm not the only person in that with that opinion. Or earlier stuff, Kurt Cobain, Sacred era, Daniel Johns a lot for some reason, but maybe I was influenced a lot by Neil Baldwin back then as well. I listened a lot to that album, so maybe that had a bit to do with that. Somebody compared me to Elliott Smith as well, which was a nice compliment, even though I'm nowhere close to where he's at, like, but his voice, maybe, that kind of, I always like that kind of subtle, undersung voice. I can't think who else I've been, that's about it really. There's a lot of Nirvana references even today, like people still saying, oh, you sound like Nirvana, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, I'm never going to deny it, like, but it's just, yeah, I listen to a lot of, I try to listen to a lot of different kinds of music that I feel has heart in it, you know. I mean, I've discovered a few underground bands and artists over the years, and it just kind of goes to show, like, the talent that's out there that never gets heard by the masses, you know. I mean, you know, like I can think of a few off the top of my head, like Lisa Papineau is a female artist I was big into, and I only discovered her band was on the soundtrack to a film called The Crow, and I just discovered her through that, and I've been a fan. I've been following her career ever since, and it's totally underground. She's just doing a DIY independent kind of label job, you know. And there's a load of other bands as well, like that. I'd say that is one good thing with the internet, I suppose. You just discover, you can listen to all these underground bands that you couldn't hear before. I mean, that's definitely a positive, you know. Yeah. I mean, even denying the Nirvana thing there, last year was I keep saying last year, this year was the 20th anniversary of Kurt Cobain, and we actually organised a bunch of tribute shows where we played all Nirvana covers, and one of them was in the Crane Lane. We done one in the Roisin Dove in Galway, and they were just fantastic shows. Like, every gig was packed, and it was like the Crane Lane was just nuts. It was actually one of the best gigs we've ever played. It was just crazy. Like, it was everyone singing along to Lithium, and it's kind of like, after all these years, you know, this is what I grew up listening to too, as my foundation in music. So I would never deny that I was, you know, that I loved Nirvana. I mean, I still listen to them. I still respect their music, and, you know, they changed my life like they did many other people too. So. It depends what mood I'm in, I suppose. If I'm just sitting on a couch at home, acoustic, but I kind of like electric. Electric is more time consuming, like, you kind of have to plug everything in, and I find when I start playing electric, I could go in there for like 10 minutes with the intention of just having a jam for 10 minutes, and then it could go on for like 3 hours, and I'm still just like messing about and getting all these different noises, and just, you know, I kind of tend to write a lot more songs in electric too, because you just have more kind of, so if you're in the zone, they just come, like, so yeah. Depends on what mood I'm in, I suppose. That's the main thing. Live, yeah, I'd have to say it's more enjoyable. It's just more spontaneous, and I like things that are spontaneous, and, you know, studio can be good, but you have to be in the right frame of mind to, you know, record, I find. It's kind of, I suppose, it's non-existent to a certain degree, but I've discovered a lot of, I worked together with a group, an online group called The New Alternative, and I organised a couple of compilation albums for them, and it was kind of cool actually. Part of the job was like being like an A&R, and I just was going through contacting these different bands that I thought were really good, and I came across a lot of bands like that actually still play grunge music and really, really well. Like there's a band in Noiseheads from the States, they're really good, and there's just a ton of really good bands I discovered. So I think it is kind of still alive to a certain degree, even if it's not called grunge, alternative rock, you know, I suppose that's the best way to call it. But I don't diss grunge in any way. I mean, it is a marketing term back then, but as I said, most bands that I've heard that have a label that say grunge in it have been good, you know. Like, I haven't heard too many bad grunge bands from my own experience, so that's why I never kind of diss the word, or, you know.